we just finished up a really, really fascinating conversation with Danielle Russo, who runs the Center for Grid Security at SAFE. And they are doing some excellent work sort of leading conversations on grid security, energy security, and how that plays into national security. And it's just a really important conversation, I think, for our industry to have, because I think we lose sight of all of the other benefits that we can bring outside of job creation and decarbonization and all the other things. And she just had a really good perspective on sort of the benefits of increasing solar and storage deployment and all the ways that we need to be thinking about that.
Yeah,
So
most people don't understand the role that energy plays in national security, and we were really able to dig into that topic in this episode and the role that having enough power to do everything else you want to do in a national and a global economy is so essential. So pairing renewable energy as part of that all of the above energy mix is not just a nice to have. It's an absolutely must have, especially right now, as we're comparing ourselves to the rest of the world and China in particular. So a lot of terrific insights in this episode. I hope folks will listen in. Let's start by having you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional path, as well as the organization that you represent.
Yeah, so I'm Danielle Russo. I lead the Center for Grid Security at SAFE. SAFE is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that's really focused on ensuring American energy policy protects us from the leverage of our adversaries when it comes to energy and national security. So we really started during the OPEC oil crisis. We did a series of simulated oil shockwaves that were televised and really aimed to get the message across that, if we don't make the right energy decisions, it can really threaten our national security. That was 20 years ago. We've expanded a lot since then. We now work on not just grid energy, but critical minerals, strategic industrial materials, and advanced transportation technologies. And we're really informed by a group of retired four-star admirals and generals and Fortune 500 CEOs that guide our work. They're not paid, they're passionate about the issues, and they really help us make sure we have the right focus and we're communicating really effectively. We're not lobbyists, we're educators around these really important issues, and we aim to drive policy in the right direction for the interests of the nation with that education. I personally found my way to SAFE. I have a defense energy background. I worked as a contracted analyst and policy writer for various offices in the Department of Defense at the time, now the Department of War, helping to study the energy resilience posture of the department and write policy that, ensured there were no gaps and that we could do what we needed to do and, protect the nation. What was clear to me in that work is the essentialness of the grid. We were really focused inside the fence line when I was working there, and that's really important too. But we didn't have the authority or the funding to change things outside the fence line, quite frankly. And that's changed a bit, but it really gave me this desire to work on more grid side issues. And I really, SAFE is the perfect place to do that. So
great.
Yeah.
I'd love if you could tell us from your point of view what energy security is and how that translates into national security.
Yes, such a great question, because I think sometimes as energy professionals, we kind of view this in like a broad sense, like a rising tide lifts all boats type of sense. Like, of course, if the grid is in a good place, then everything happens, without disruption and we can do what we need to do. But it's much more specific than that. To me, energy security means I have reliable, affordable access to the energy I need to do what I need to do on a consistent basis. Like most of the time, I have what I need to do the important things I need to do when it comes to energy. What that means for national security, like if we wanted to really drill down and get specific, they're kind of like these main tenets that we look at the center. Like can military installations within the country do what they need to do? Do they have the power to do that? Literally, the grid power to do that, or the on-base power to do that? Do we have an energy environment that is attractive to defense critical industry that makes this country a good place for them to exist, a place that they can prosper, a place that we can be the home of these really important supply chain elements? And now, a big part of that has always been strategic technologies, but you could really say that's AI now, right? So are we a country that has reliable, affordable, accessible power for these really important strategic technologies for national security? So that's kind of the connection there. And I'm going to steal, something that I heard someone say at a conference, which was, energy is about like 7% of the GDP, but it's the first 7%. It's the 7% that all the other percents need to exist. And that's true for national security. That's true for economic prosperity. That's true for anything else. And that's really the connection there. It's the foundation.
So
you touched on something that I haven't really heard connected to the conversation about national security, which is kind of making the United States a attractive place for investment to sort of have that full value chain of different critical technologies and building up American manufacturing as a sort of a foundational piece of national security, which I think is something that people maybe don't always associate with national security. Like having everything that we need here at home sort of makes us more secure. And we obviously talk a lot here at SIA about sort of, the increase in electricity demand from all sorts of sectors, AI, you mentioned, advanced manufacturing. And so, I think we are increasingly talking about, the role of solar and storage in meeting that demand and how that can sort of help make the nation more secure. But I just, love to hear your sort of thoughts on, the sort of energy mix and the generation mix and how that plays into making a secure grid and making our country a more attractive place for new investment and new manufacturing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, and this is like a unique response in the context of an energy emergency, which we are in. When power is scarce, it's pretty unwise to pick and choose the ways in which you would like to make and receive energy, right? Like, we really need to be willing to put everything on the table. It's hard to talk about energy security without talking about energy resilience. And what the data tells us is that resilience comes from diversity and distribution in the system. And, we need to take full advantage of all of the domestic resources we have in order to reach a level of resilience and security that allows us an autonomy in our decision making, right, when it comes to national security. And affordability is a big piece of this too. When we talk about like what's an attractive environment for defense critical industry, and we can kind of like zoom in on maybe like aluminum as an example, the price of power is a huge decision point for that industry. And what the data tells us is that when power prices go up, the doors of those facilities close. And when they close, they don't reopen. That's kind of what we see happening there. They also need remarkably reliable power. An aluminum smelter can tolerate about an hour of downtime a year, where things not just are disruptive to the business, but are dangerous. They can start to explode. There can be other issues. It's hard to make a plan to exist and expand in a place where affordable, reliable power is not a guarantee, or it's something you'll have to wait in line for, So that's a dynamic we need to change in the country.
So tell us about what you think the role of storage and solar is in that reliability calculation.
Well, I think, again, in the context of the energy emergency, speed is really the name of the game right now. Speed is maybe the most important element of energy security right now. If you can tick all the other boxes, but you can't do it quickly in the world today, it doesn't really matter. So how can we inject speed into what we're doing here? And if we sort of like racked and stacked different energy technologies and how quickly they can kind of be like speed to power, speed to grid, right? There's not really anything faster than solar and storage. And that's really consequential in our decision making, right? I mean, storage, you could be using like tomorrow. Solar you could be using in less than 18 months.
Right.
That's really fast. And there are, of course, other technologies that are really important. Again, diversity in the system is essential. We will not get there with solar and storage alone.
Right.
But if we're having a conversation about speed, which we are, we're having a conversation about solar and storage, and that's really important.
Yeah, and storage being in neutral technology, it doesn't matter what type of energy you're generating. Storage is a part of the long-term solution.
Absolutely. We like to say storage is near-term firm. Near-term firm capacity comes from storage, and we see that. A lot of times we'll see large loads or data centers use storage as a tool to accelerate interconnection, to accelerate, the firm power experience they need to start to function. And that's kind of like, standalone storage and connecting to the grid. So yeah, it's just energy in the battery. It doesn't matter how you make it.
You brought up AI, which is obviously, top of mind for all sorts of different reasons. When we think about sort of the AI race or the sort of competition globally to build out more, data centers and capacity in the United States, where does that play into the national security conversation? Do we need to be thinking about sort of how we're using our resources here at home and leveraging the intellectual capital here at home so that we sort of fortify our national security? Is it about direct competition with folks like China and other adversaries? Like where does the AI piece fit in on the national security, energy security conversation?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to clarify what does it mean to win the AI race?
Sure.
Like, what does that really look like, especially in the national security side of the house? And we wrote a report about a year ago now that sort of talked about the electrification of defense, not in the sense that they're like, switching out diesel things for electric things, but that they are shifting a lot of critical defense functions to, AI focused tools, things, everything from training and simulation to decision making to reconnaissance to facial recognition to, all these really important things are becoming electrified through the use of AI. And when we, think about AI and national security, and we think about what national security means, national security really means, like, can I make the best decision the fastest? Can I make it faster than my adversaries? And, and if I can't, do I have enough resources to outlast my adversary, right? That's really what defense is. And, that's what the application of AI is in the defense space. It's a decision-making tool. It accelerates your ability to make good decisions. And if we're not the leader in that, someone, maybe who doesn't have the military capability that we do in the traditional sense, has the capability to use AI to make better, faster decisions, and therefore have a set of resources that can outlast ours. That shifts the whole dynamic of defense and national security really quickly. And, there's another piece of it too. It's like winning the AI race means you have like the dominant product that's being used in the world when it comes to AI, right? And we've seen a little bit of this with, like, you could say, like, social media and how that can kind of shape the way people see the world and experience and understand different things. I mean, I feel like that's a drop in the bucket to the way AI could shape it. So there's like this other bigger concern, right, of like who is going to shape really the world's understanding of information, of, what do they have access to, what's kind of shaping the way that they see things. That's what that means to win the AI race. And there are sort of like just a few ingredients you need to be good at AI, if you will. You need smart, capable engineers. You need the hardware. You need access to lots of data to train the models. And you need power. And when you look at the United States and you look at China, pretty neck and neck in all those things. And power is going to be the deciding factor here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when we see, some of these data points about how China's expanded their grid and how we're expanding ours, it's very consequential in AI dominance and therefore defense.
Yeah, to that point, China installed more solar and storage in the first half of 2025 than the entire rest of the world combined.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point about the ingredients that are required for that to maintain staying competitive,
Mm-hmm.
I think the data is going to tell us a story that we don't really want to hear.
No, I mean, that's just a piece of the story, right? If you look at the 2020s alone, China built over 8,000 miles of high voltage transmission.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, we built a little less than 400.
Right.
In 2025 alone, they added 8 times the capacity to their grid that we did in the United States. And since 2021, they've increased their capacity more than the entire U.S. grid. So they added an entire U.S. grid to their grid on top of what they already had since 2021. It's sobering, what they are doing compared to what we are. And of course, China's a nation with command and control when it comes to infrastructure. It's kind of hard to compare that to the way we do things in the United States. And I'm in no way suggesting we should do things the way they do things, but certainly you have to think we could accelerate what we're doing here.
To your point, though, about how we compare from a grid perspective, what does America need to do? If you could choose, if you could decide, what would we do right now as a society to secure our grid?
Expand transmission. And, I honestly, the first thing that came to my mind was permitting reform, which I know is not exciting answer, but I think it's so
but it's true.
Very exciting.
Yeah, it's these very practical things that we need to just do as a country to get these things done. And, at SAFE, we talk a lot about kind of not picking winners and losers when it comes to energy. And we're such a fortunate nation in so many ways in terms of our energy resources. And if I could have anything I would want us to be willing to benefit from every tool we have in the toolbox and not just our favorite tools. So
I also, there's sort of the build more argument to bolster our security, which I think is very clear. You just laid out some sobering data points of where we need to grow. And then there's building smarter, right? Having a grid that is more more reliable and more secure because, it has the capabilities that it needs. So are there, in addition to sort of, having excess capacity and having a much more robust and strengthened transmission system, are there other technologies or policy mechanisms, market mechanisms that you all are thinking about that help make the grid secure as we are, thinking about scale?
Yes. And I think, it's really important to understand that all of this is a both and approach. There's some really quick hits we need to have while we expand the system. And there was a really great study put out by Duke, I believe it was, that talks about the best way to expand your system really quickly is to better use the system you already have. And there are technologies that allow us to do that. Storage is one of those technologies that really helps us better use the system we have today really quickly. Advanced transmission technologies are another, and there are a number of challenges with the implementation of those, but at the same time, there was just the announcement of the fund from DOE to kind of promote the expansion of those, which is fantastic. It's a great step in the right direction. But again, I think it's important to remember as we use these quick hits and these technologies, we still need to expand the system in the traditional sense. And we still need to do things like build out generation, build out traditional transmission while we kind of optimize.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain advanced transmission technology?
Yes. Advanced transmission technologies are physical and sometimes software upgrades that you can implement on existing transmission lines. So they can be everything from sensors to things that read temperature to things that kind of analyze the system in real time. they help us get more of a live view into the system. The way the system works right now is on a basis of assumptions and averages, which is smart, and we're really conservative in those assumptions. And because of that, we're not flowing that much power through our power lines that often because we don't want to have an issue that could be dangerous or could, really hurt the system. What these technologies do is allow us to be able to flow more power through the lines because we have a real-time view of what's going on in terms of temperature and wind and what the system needs and who's using what. And they can literally be deployed tomorrow. Like I said, some of them are just sensors. I talked to someone last week in Boston where their transmission technology is really just software, and they're assessing congestion and helping people reroute things and saving them lots of money. So it's a suite of really different things, but they're all pretty fantastic and they're all pretty affordable, which unfortunately is a challenge with their implementation.
I would imagine with that technology, you can get a down system back online a lot faster too, because you can quickly identify where the problem is.
Yeah, there are remarkable benefits to having a better view of your system in real time. And we don't really function like that right now with our grid in the United States. So
you have to see that the power line is down. And then
someone has to call you.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. It's not always that archaic,
explode.
Switching gears a bit, you mentioned critical minerals as another sort of area that you all work in, which is super relevant to our industry as well. What kinds of things are you all looking at as far as sort of what can we do, again, like maybe waving that magic wand, maybe like what can the United States do to sort of fortify our critical minerals and do a better job of securing that and bolstering energy security that way as well?
Yeah, well, energy security starts with your supply chain, and critical minerals are a huge part of that. At SAFE, we have a fantastic critical minerals center. I think our grid work is pretty good, but our critical minerals work is fantastic. Abigail, who leads that center, just testified in front of Congress, I think 2 days ago, right? So they're really experts, and, what they are doing is making sure that we have an understanding of what we need, that we are making the right investments here domestically and with our friends, right? We're not trying to exist on an island here, and we will need other people to, contribute to our success as we contribute to theirs, and making sure that policy reflects what that industry needs. And in the meantime, make sure that we're not cutting ourselves off from the things we need in the interest of accelerating onshoring. So, I can't speak to it at the depth that they can. They're really the experts, but it's such an important piece of all of this. And I think you can really see that in the domestic solar industry as well, and the investments they're making in domestic critical minerals. And that's the best thing we can do, right? There's nothing like the demand signal of purchased and built infrastructure when it comes to critical minerals. And the solar and storage industry in the U.S. has been a really important part of that.
Yeah. I don't know that that's something that we really talk about enough. Not only do we benefit as an industry from creating that demand and that built infrastructure to increase sort of the domestic supply of critical minerals, but in doing so, we support national security by making those critical minerals available for other uses, which are just as important.
It's remarkable.
So I think that's a sort of a good piece for us to continue to think about.
What would you say is at risk if we don't take an all of the above energy approach to expanding our energy grid in the U.S.?
Of course, I would say our national security is at risk. But to get more specific about it, I think our position as a leader in AI dominance is at risk. Our ability to deleverage our adversaries, when it comes to energy. And I think, I'm not happy to say this, but what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz is a great example of this. If we do not make sure we have the energy that we need, we allow our adversaries to use energy as leverage over us. And that means that nations who don't really wish us well who don't have the military capability that we do are able to disrupt our economy and, kind of challenge our national security.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason for that to happen. We have a lot of what we need, if not everything, more than what we need here, and through our allies. And, getting back to that autonomy will require, again, being willing to use every tool in our toolbox. And we have a great toolbox in the United States. We really do. In so many areas, we're a remarkably blessed nation when it comes to energy. And all we have to do is be willing to tap into it.
Great.
That's inspirational.
Yeah. So let's get back to the U.S. solar and storage industry. Obviously, there's been a significant domestic manufacturing renaissance in the solar and storage industry here in the U.S. With over the past 10 years, it's just been exponential growth, particularly for solar, and now we're seeing that growth on the storage side. I'd love to get your reflection just about how the U.S. industry is doing and what you think.
Yeah, I find the domestic solar industry in the United States to be quite remarkable. They're much further ahead than I think they get the recognition for. Today, the domestic solar industry in the United States has created or supported over 50,000 jobs, which is incredible. They are producing a little over 30 gigawatts of capacity every year. When you compare that to the demand, which my understanding is between like 40 and 50 gigawatts, there's a delta there, but they're right there. And they're really an industry that wants to prioritize American customers. They want to help with that speed to grid. And as they're doing it, they are making investments in a whole set of other strategic industries for the country. We're talking about they're purchasing and investing in domestic copper, domestic steel, aluminum, glass making, these really critical industries that we're working to onshore. When you purchase a domestically manufactured solar panel, that's not only an act of job creation, you are investing in the onshoring of defense critical industries. And in a lot of ways, I think that's something that the AI sector doesn't get enough credit for because they're not super outspoken about, their energy purchases, and for good reason. They're just kind of protecting themselves and their intellectual property. But, they're purchasing a significant amount of domestic solar. They have a really important role in the job creation of that industry that they could lay some claim to, and I think that is an example for others as well, that if that's something that you want to do, your industry is passionate about, buy domestic solar, it's available for you. They're
sure
making
is.
it at scale. So,
Yeah.
and, there's some great examples. And, if you ever have a chance to go to a facility, whether it's in Ohio or Georgia, or I know there's a new one opening in South Carolina, I've been to them. It's just remarkable. The manufacturing capability, the community, it's great to see.
Yeah, and this goes back to your original point about speed to deployment.
Yeah.
Solar and storage are quick to deploy. And for the past 5 years in a row, we've seen through our Solar Market Insight report and our new Storage Market Insight report that deployment is between 40 and 80% of all capacity added to the grid every single quarter, year over year. And just in the last report we put out alone, that's equivalent to 14 Hoover dams.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount of power.
It is.
So to make it harder to build doesn't seem like the right path forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think it's so important for us to remember the sort of secondary and tertiary benefits of all of that growth that supporting those as you turn them the defense critical industries. I think that's a message that large energy buyers need to be thinking about, that when they're investing in quick to deploy and what we believe to be the sort of smart choice of energy procurement, they're not just solving their own challenges of meeting energy demand. They're also bolstering other industries that they will rely on in the future, and helping sort of create that kind of full picture
Definitely
of what we need here at home. So that's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has
Thank
been a great
you.
conversation. I hope we'll continue to collaborate, because I think these messages are ones that don't always rise to the surface, but are important for everybody to hear. So
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.